Hey everybody, today's coding challenge is the Stock Prices Fortune Teller coding challenge. And I'm actually really excited about this one. I'm excited to show a few different ways to do this. So the basic idea is you have a machine that can predict tomorrow's stock prices for a specific stock every hour on the hour. So it's going to give you 24 data points every hour starting at midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. And it's going to go through the whole day and tell you all the stock prices for tomorrow. So we're going to write a function that will tell us the best time to buy and the best time to sell to make the most money for tomorrow. So approaching this, I would say we don't want to look for the lowest price or the highest price necessarily, and here's why. This is the lowest price, $10.59, but we're not going to make a lot of money right there. We'll make more money if we buy right here and sell right here. That's the biggest gap. Okay, that's what we're really looking for. Is the biggest gap between where we buy and where we sell and how much money we make there. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start, let's write a function called get buy and sell points. It takes in an array. And then we're going to pass in stock prices as our data set. Well, okay. So before we write a for loop, let's keep track of what we need to keep track of. So we're going to have our buy point. We're going to have our sell point. And then we need to keep track of the biggest gap we found so far, and that's the most money that we've been able to make on a purchase so far, is our gap, okay? And then what we're going to return is our buy point and our sell point. And you could return this any way you want. You could do an object or whatever, but we're just going to do an array, keep it simple. All right, so now let's write our for loop. So we're going to go through the array one by one. And we're going to check each one as a buy point. And then we're going to go through it again and check each one as a sell point. Now, one thing to notice here is that if we start these both at 0, we might end up with a buy point over here and a sell point over here, and that's not possible. So what we actually want to do is always keep our sell point chronologically after our buy point. So our sell point, is always going to start after our buy point. Okay. Now, basically, what we need to do is check if our current buy and sell point that we're keeping track of creates a gap larger than the biggest gap that we found so far. So let's check that. If array at j minus array at I is bigger than the biggest gap we found so far, we want to set that as the new gap to check against, the new standard. We want to set our buy point equal to I and our sell point equal to j, and then move on. So the next iteration, it's going to check what we just found as the largest gap, and it's going to say, is this gap bigger? If so, it sets the buy point, it sets the sell point, and moves on. So at the very end, we're going to get the best buy point and sell point, and that should be indexes 8 and 15, and there it is. The one thing you'll notice with this is that we're using a nested for loop, which isn't very efficient. True, we're only using 24 data points, but what if our function returns every minute on the minute instead? Now you have 1,400 data points. And what if you can do this for multiple stocks, right? Now you might have 1 million data points, and maybe Google buys you out, and now millions of people are using it. And efficiency becomes a big deal. And the problem with a nested for loop is that as these data points increase, the number of operations your computer is doing to come up with the result increases exponentially faster than the data points. So what we want to do is let's use one for loop to figure this out. Now the trick here is I needs to keep track of everything for us. It needs to be our buy point, it needs to be our sell point, everything. So what we need to do is, well, let's look at this data for a minute. We have 24 data points, potentially more, and we're going to say let's start with index 0 as our buy point, 12.75. Let's say somewhere at the end here we have like a $24 stock price, right? That would be the biggest gap, okay? But if we bought here and sold at 24, we're going to make like $11.25 per share. Whereas if we bought here, we would make more, okay? So basically, what we need to do is every single index that we check, if it is smaller than our current buy point that we're keeping track of, we need to set that as the new buy point. So if array at I is smaller than array at our current buy point, then that becomes the new buy point. Buy point index, or set the buy point equal to index I. If it is bigger, then that means we can make some money selling at this point. So now we need to check the gap. So now we need to say, okay, well, if we sold here, what would the gap be? And is that bigger than the biggest gap we found so far? So if array at I minus array at buy is greater than the gap, the biggest gap we found so far, set that as the new gap. Set our sell point equal to index I. That's where we want to sell at. And here's the thing. With how we're currently keeping track of this, this is going to return the wrong number. Let me show you. This returns 22 and 15, okay? Which isn't possible. We can't buy after we've sold. So what it's doing is it's saying at the very end it finds this 10.59 and it says that's the smallest number that I found. So I'm going to set that as the new buy point. And that's what we want it to do, is to keep track of that buy point, but we don't want it to return necessarily the last buy point that it found. We want a new variable called final buy point, and that's what we want to return. And we only want to update this guy when we make a sale, right? If we find a bigger gap, we say that's the new buy point, that's the new sell point, that's the gap. That's the number we want to return. Is when we find a bigger gap, we want to set that final buy point equal to the buy point we're using. That way, the function can move on and find a new buy point like this, but if it from there never finds a larger gap, it won't set that as the final buy point, and that's what we're going to return as the final buy point. So that should fix that issue, and there we go, indexes 8 and 15. So that's how to accomplish that using one for loop, and the beautiful thing there is it fixes the efficiency issue of using 2 for loops. And I had a lot of fun working on this one, and I hope you did too. If you have any comments or improvements or different ways to do it, leave them in the comments below. Go ahead and like and subscribe, and I'll see you in a future video. Thanks, guys.